Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Cameron. This is kind of going to be probably turn out to be a longer video. It's going to be a lot of me rambling and talking about things. So what I want to talk about today is the overheating issues with the Toyota 1kz-te 3-liter turbo diesel engine, which is what's in my 1994 Toyota Hilux Surf. So we're going to get into, some common issues with this engine, why people claim that the heads always crack. So we'll just get into it. I've spent the past over a year. I've owned it for just over a year now, so there's been a lot of research. I think I've read every single forum post ever written on this engine, just trying to understand it, why they are prone to overheating and eventually the heads cracking. Also done, a lot of research into what this engine was designed to do. So we'll just get into it. So go on any forum, I Hate Mud or Reddit or the 1kz-te Facebook groups, anything like that. If you, search for overheating, the top comments are always going to say, oh, the head's cracked. That's it. There's nothing else it could be. The head is cracked. And yeah, there have been a lot of documented cases where the cylinder head has cracked. And in the early versions of this engine, there was a flaw, which I have one of the earlier ones. This is 1994. I guess in some of the coolant passages, mainly in between the cylinders, as well as around the pre-combustion chambers, the coolant passages, the walls of those were quite thin. And those sections do get very hot, so that's where it's kind of prone to cracking. So yes, it can happen, but we have to remember this is a Toyota engine. Toyota is known for their reliability, and if you drive it the way it was intended, these are great engines, you won't really have any issues. Let's get into kind of where these typically crack, and what I mean by that is what markets they crack in. So remember, this is a vehicle imported from Japan, so that's important. So remember that. In the forums and online, all the posts that I've seen are obviously in English, and they're usually people from Australia, North America, sometimes New Zealand, but not as much. There's a big difference in the roads between those markets and Japan. And what I mean by that is, so we'll take Canada as an example. Where I live in Alberta, we have, the Trans-Canada Highway. Speed limit is 110 kilometers an hour, and that is through the mountains, right? So that's up and down, big, long, steep gradient of hills, which is fine for modern engines that were built to be sold here, right? So made for the North American market. So you can, pedal to the floor, power up these hills at 100, 120 kilometers an hour, no issue. I do it in my Volkswagen Tiguan all the time, never had an issue with that. If you try to do that in this engine, it was not designed to do that. You're gonna have a problem. And that's typically, if you read the forum posts, that's what people have done to cause their heads to crack, right? So I just went on, this past week, and I've seen 2 or 3 posts where my engine started overheating going up a hill at 100 kilometers an hour, and that you're just asking for problems. And we have to remember where this vehicle was designed to be sold, and that is in Japan. Earlier this year, I actually drove in Japan and drove in the mountains, and so here's what I kind of realized from that experience. On the highways in the mountains, they are relatively flat. You don't really go up and over mountains, you go through them. Japan has lots of tunnels through the mountains. You have to remember, in the 80s and 90s, the Japan economy was absolutely booming. We'll just let these folks go by. All right, so the infrastructure in Japan, the roads through the highways through the mountains are relatively flat. They go through tunnels. You don't go up and down really steep hills. And those are the roads that they have where the speed limit is 100 kilometers per hour. When you get into the mountains where they're actually steep roads, you're going up long hills, the speed limit is 40 kilometers per hour. How do I know this? I was just there. I was in Hakone for a few days earlier this year, rented a car, drove through this steep winding road. Speed limit is 40, and that's on a good day. It was actually raining quite a bit, so a lot of the time we were only going 20 or 30 kilometers an hour. If you go up a steep hill in this vehicle, at 40 kilometers an hour, it will never overheat because it was designed to be driven in Japan. If you drive on a flat road at 100, 120 kilometers an hour, it will never overheat. Again, it was designed to be driven in Japan. For markets outside of Japan, where this was sold, thinking like New Zealand, the UK has them. They were sold, this engine was sold a lot in the Philippines, I've seen it a bunch, the Middle East, relatively flat areas. Now, they do have hills for sure. And Toyota, you know, they later added like an intercooler to this to help with cooling issues. So they did kind of solve that. But this engine, the non-intercooled early versions of this engine, they were designed to be driven in Japan on relatively flat roads. And if they were on steep hills, it was at lower speeds. Driving this vehicle out here in Canada, just last night, driving up, the speed limit was 100 on these really hilly roads. I did it at 80. I turned the overdrive off so I could get the revs up so you're not bogging down the engine. No issues. The needle didn't even move for the coolant temperature. You can't drive these like a modern day gasoline engine, right? And I learned that the hard way, because when I first got this and it was first, you know, ready and on the road, it was November of last year. Drove it all winter through the mountains, no issues. You know, 80, 100 kilometers up these steep hills, no problem, because it was like negative 20, negative 30 degrees Celsius. When I tried to do that the first day in the summer when it was like 25 degrees Celsius, immediately that I saw that needle start to move, and it freaked me out because I've heard a lot about these heads cracking. So as soon as it started to move, I pulled over, let it cool down, and then just took it slow and didn't have any more issues. That kind of led to me, you know, investigating, okay, well, maybe there's some issues with my cooling system. Make sure that everything in the cooling system is new and working well. So I have a couple of videos on that. You know, I'll put them up here. I replaced the viscous fan hub, new thermostat that opens at a slightly lower temperature, new water pump that I think is working more efficiently. And, you know, I've done all of that, and now cooling system's working really well. I can take these hills at, you know, a really steep hill, probably wouldn't push it past 70 kilometers an hour. Moderate hills, 80 to 90, no problem. Speed limit around here, the highest is 110. So really only go up to that on the flat areas. But if you drive it like that, you're not gonna have any issues. So let's talk about what causes cracking of the heads. So obviously it's your engine overheating, but how do you get there? With these diesel engines, this is an indirect injection diesel engine. So what does that mean? It means it has a pre-combustion chamber. The fuel gets into there, the glow plug heats it up, and then it flows into the cylinder. It's compressed, and that's where you get your combustion. So what does that mean for these things getting really hot? In a diesel engine like this, more fuel equals more heat. So if you're driving on these steep hills and the car starts to slow down, your initial thought is to just slam on the accelerator pedal, which just all it does in the diesel engines is it dumps more fuel into the cylinders. More fuel equals more heat. You cause your exhaust gas temperatures, or EGTs, to rise, and that is what cracks the head of your engine. So yeah, we went over the cooling system, how to drive it, there's one of those Dodge Rams that's gonna ride your here in Canada if you're going too slow. Yeah, so we talked about how to drive them, get your cooling system in check, make sure that's all good. Really the thing is, don't push it going up hills. That is the main issue that causes heads cracking. When I started having these overheating issues, I was definitely afraid that the head had cracked. So, you know, I pressure checked the cooling system, all good, didn't exhaust gas, like a CO2 check in the cooling system, no issues there. I have read that, you know, there can be like very small cracks that only kind of open up when the engine is like really hot. If that was the case, I would be losing coolant. I'm not. I monitor that pretty religiously. I'm also not losing any oil, so I don't think we have a cracked head or anything, and I'd like to keep it that way. We're at about 185,000 kilometers on this. There's lots of documented cases of these going to 500,000, 700,000 kilometers, no issues. So yeah, just be careful with what you read online. A lot of people say, you know, these engines are good to like 200,000 kilometers and then the head cracks, or like, it's not if your head cracked, it's when. So you just got to remember that like the people that are cracking their heads are probably abusing the engines. You have to drive these, you can't drive them the way you would a normal, you know, like if I got a brand new 4Runner, I would never have any issues. I could pedal to the floor, 140 kilometers up a hill and it would probably be fine. Although maybe we should use the 5th gen as an example, because the 6th gen has just come out. People said they're having some issues with that, but I don't really know too much about it. Let's talk about the use of the overdrive button. So this is mainly for the automatic transmissions, which is what I have. If you have a manual, you obviously have a lot more control, kind of what RPM you're sitting at. So what I have found going up hills, this kind of sweet spot is around like 2,500 RPM, kind of in that 24 to 2,800 RPM range, which at about 80 kilometers an hour is overdrive off and your torque converter locked. You'll hear it kind of, so these transmissions are technically 3 gears plus overdrive, but there's actually a couple additional gears, right? So you have 1st gear, 2nd gear, 3rd gear, then you have 3rd gear with your torque converter locked and your overdrive off. And then you have, if you turn the overdrive on, you have 4th gear, and then 4th gear with your torque converter locked, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but that's sort of what I have seen. Anyway, the sweet spot to be is your third gear, overdrive off, and your torque converter locked. And that's, for me, sits around in that 2,400 to 2,500 RPM range. That has been great. Haven't really had any issues with that, so that's what I'm going to continue to do. A lot of people will say like I said, the coolant or the factory temperature gauge is useless, because by the time your coolant is actually heating up, the exhaust gas temperatures might have skyrocketed already and it's too late. So what a lot of people do is they'll put an EGT probe and they'll drive by that. So what you want to do, and I'm going to have a video on this because I have one, I just haven't had the time to install it, because you need to tap a hole into your exhaust manifold. So where you want to put it is in the exhaust manifold so that your probe is reading pre-turbo temperatures. Why is that important? Because that's going to be the most accurate reading. I have seen kits online where people will remove their EGR system or their exhaust gas recirculation system, and they'll put a probe in the block where the EGR comes out. That's probably fine, but I have also seen that the most accurate temperature is in the exhaust manifold pre-turbo. So basically as close to the turbo as you can get it. So your exhaust manifold like comes out of all 4 cylinders and it kind of combines into one right before it goes through the turbo. That's where you want to put it. So I'll have a video on that, so stay tuned for that. Once you get your EGT gauge in there, what I have read, sort of maximum temperature you want to see on that. So you can, a lot of them you can set like a warning temperature. So you want to set that. I've seen people say 600 and 650 degrees Celsius. Once I have mine in and I'll do some experimenting, I'll kind of give you guys an update on that. But let's say you set your warning for 650 degrees Celsius. So set a little alarm for that. So if you ever get your EGTs up to that temperature, pull back, take your foot off the accelerator, let it cool down. Don't just dump more fuel into there, because that you're going to crack the head. I have read that the factory turbos on these are rated for up to 800 degrees Celsius. Set your warning for 650. It maybe creeps up to 700 for a couple seconds, probably going to be fine. Anything higher than that, you're going to maybe have issues with the turbo, right? So it can hold 800 degrees Celsius for a little bit. If you push it past that, you're going to have issues. If you're getting your EGTs that high, you're gonna have issues melting pistons as well. That has happened. I've seen that online. I don't know what temperature that happens at, but I plan to never get there and find out for myself. More to come on the EGT probe installation, but that's definitely something that you want to do. People also do like an aftermarket coolant temperature sensor. They put it in the upper radiator hose because that's kind of the most accurate for the coolant temperature, because that comes right out of the head. I might do that. I'll probably see how it goes with the EGT gauge and go from there. All right, so let's talk about the EGR system. There's a lot of people say that you want to do an EGR delete because that will cool your engine. And in theory, that sounds like it makes sense. But let's get into a little bit of the science behind that. So what does the EGR do? Basically, the EGR will recirculate some exhaust gases back into your intake manifold to mix with fresh, cold air and send that into the cylinders. And why does it do that? It's a couple of reasons. Main reason is emissions. For diesel engines, unburnt diesel or partially burnt fuel, it does create like harmful gases. They're not good for the environment. They're not good to breathe it in. In an effort to reduce that, what you do is you take some of the exhaust gas, you circle it back into the intake, going through the combustion process again, you get rid of some of that. This one has an EGR system. It only is operating at kind of cruising speeds. So when you're cruising down the highway, a lot of people will say that it's a good idea to get rid of it because it cools your engine. And in theory, that kind of makes sense, right? Instead of pumping hot exhaust gases back into the engine, we're going to block that off and we're only going to pump fresh, clean, cold air in. Okay, so part of the EGR system is actually, and you can debate about it in the comments if you want, this is my opinion, I've done the research, it's kind of the conclusion that I have made. The exhaust gases that you pump back in, they are basically inert, right? What does that mean? All of the oxygen, or most of it, has been burnt up, so it won't reignite. Okay, so you're pumping this hot exhaust back into the intake, but it's inert. So actually, because you're getting less oxygen in there, you don't have as much like oxygen to combust. You're actually going to lower your exhaust gas temperatures. Now, yes, you're pumping dirty soot into there. It's not great for the engine. I agree with that 100%. But you cannot argue with the fact that it does cool your exhaust gas temperatures. Inert gases do not combust. If you're pumping inert gases in and replacing, clean oxygen with those gases, your EGTs will go down. Now, there's a lot of debate on, even though it cools your EGTs, technically the EGR system's only open when you're cruising. It's not when you're accelerating or on startup or anything like that. So you should just get rid of it, because when you're not working the engine very hard, that's the only time it's open. Maybe, I'm not an engineer, so I have a degree in chemistry, I don't know. You'd have to talk to the Toyota engineers in the 90s that invented this system. They did it obviously because of emissions, but they also would have factored in that it's going to cool the EGTs. Personally, now I may change my mind because I have not yet pulled the intake manifold. I'm going to do that. I have new gaskets, so I'm going to pull that and clean everything probably over the winter, and we'll see what condition it's actually in. I've seen some pretty, gunged up manifolds online, and so why does that happen? So obviously, when the exhaust gas gets recirculated, there's actually like a fine little bit of oil that can get mixed in there as well. That kind of coats the walls of your intake manifold, and over time the soot from the exhaust builds up and it can actually clog your intake manifold and restrict airflow. If your engine's not getting enough air, it's going to be working too hard. You're going to be getting more fuel in and you don't have enough air, so it's going to be higher EGTs. So you kind of gotta do your own research on this one and make the call. My decision on whether or not I block off the EGR, which obviously I'd just be using this for off-road use only if I were to do that, because removing your EGR is illegal in a lot of places. I'm gonna make that call when I pull the intake manifold and kind of see the condition of it myself. So we talked a little bit about, some of the modifications that I've done that may be contributing to overheating. So obviously this ARB bull bar, a lot of people. So just to be clear, when I was running the stock bumper, no roof rack, I was still having the issues. So this did not cause the issues. I may be contributing to it a little bit. A lot of people will put a bull bar on here or some sort of aftermarket off-road bumper, and they'll put like big lights on there. If you've got one of these engines and you put a bull bar on here, it's got pretty good airflow at the bottom. These kind of fins direct air up to the radiator, so that's good. Keeps the front grille open. I don't think it really reduces airflow that much. I will never put, a lot of people put the big kind of rally style lights right here because it's, that's what you do with an ARB bull bar. I'm not going to do that because I'm just worried about restricting airflow. I want as much air coming through here as possible. Obviously the roof rack with a rooftop tent and an awning on top of there, not helping because we're adding weight. I got the drawer system in the back. When we go camping, we carry our own water, a bunch of firewood. There's a lot of weight in this vehicle. That's all going to contribute to overheating. Yeah, some sort of upgrades you can do. So the early versions of this engine came with a 7-blade fan. like what I had. You want to swap that to a 10-blade fan like Toyota did, you know, a few years later. 10 blades going to suck more air through the radiator, cool things down. It's going to blow more air onto the engine, help with that as well. You want to make sure your viscous fan hub is working properly. They are prone to, so how, I did explain how it works in my fan hub install video, so you can check that out here. Just a quick overview. There's oil inside. When that oil gets hot, it expands and locks the fan. It's all mechanical and it's bolted to your water pump. So when that oil heats up, it locks it in place so it actually spins faster with the water pump. Yeah, make sure that's all good. If you're running big tires, you know, maybe consider re-gearing. The tires themselves do add extra weight, and that extra rotational mass adds to it. What else was there? You know, obviously if you don't need a bumper, don't put one on. I put it on because I should have filmed it when we were driving up here. A deer jumped out onto the road pretty close to us. There are no airbags in here, so you know, these ARB ones, they're designed for kangaroos in Australia back in the 70s when they started putting these on. So that's why I have one, more of a safety thing. I mean, it does look pretty cool, not gonna lie. Yeah, but the main thing with these engines to not crack the head is to drive it how it was designed, not gunning it up hills. You know, take it easy. On the flat, it's fine, but when you're driving uphill, you know, ease off the accelerator, put your hazards on if you need to. There's one, you know, easy mod you can do. I'll show you. So in addition to putting the hazards on, you get a bumper sticker. It says Slow Car Club so that people know. Yeah, really comes down to how you drive it. If you drive it properly, these are great engines. They get way too much hate online. I made this decision to buy one knowing that there's all these issues, but I've never gotten into that red zone for the coolant temperature. You know, again, that was designed by Toyota engineers. They know what they're doing. Like I said, I read the manual. It says if you get into that red zone, and I'll show you what that looks like, just in case some of you might have a newer version of this engine that maybe doesn't have the same gauge. Here it is in the bottom left there. So there's that little red zone. So normal operating temperature, it sits right just to the left of the actual temperature symbol there, just to the left of it. I've seen it creep, you know, just kind of past it, but where my finger is, you know, it's got quite a ways to go still to the red. When I was in that position, you know, I slowed down, pulled over a couple times. You know, that's what your hazards are for. It's okay to use them. Yeah, so again, these get a lot of hate. People say, oh, the heads are made of glass, they always crack. It's not if, but when your head cracks. Maybe we'll get there one day. A new head is about $2,000. The job itself, I think I could probably do it, but we're gonna run this as long as we can. You know, it's 31 years old. That's a long time for a vehicle. So if we can get some extra life out of it, you know, we'll run this as long as we can. If the head does crack because I'm an idiot and try and go 120 kilometers up a hill, you know, that's something that's on me. I deserve that, and I will pay the money to buy a new one. I should mention another thing too is, you know, diesel engines, they like to breathe. So one upgrade I might do in the future is a snorkel. A lot of people put a 3-inch snorkel to help improve airflow into the intake. Another common mod is a 3-inch exhaust, right? So starting right at the dump pipe. I think these come with like a maybe 2.5-inch system on them. It's pretty beefy, to be honest. But maybe, you know, if my exhaust ever rusts out, I would probably look into replacing it with a 3-inch version. A lot of people have had good results with that. But yeah, so again, this is kind of a longer video. Thanks for sticking to the end. Lots more to come on the Surf. Like I mentioned, we got that EGT installation video. I'm gonna do a video on cleaning the intake manifold and all that. Lots more adventures coming. It's fall right now. We've got a few trips planned. Gonna do a bunch of skiing in the winter. We'll head out to BC for a couple trips. But yeah, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I know it was kind of a longer format. Anything that I said that you maybe disagree with, or, you know, have additional information on, please let me know in the comments. Doing my best to kind of keep or to contribute to the community of these vehicles and you know, keep these trucks on the road as much as we can. I'm pretty active in the Facebook groups and subreddits for the 1kz-te. Haven't really gotten into I hate mud. There's a lot of old guys on there that just say, oh, your head's cracked. I've been through that experience, so that's fine. I think these engines can go for a very long time without cracking the head. And if you drive them the way Toyota intended to, you're not going to have any issues. Thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more surf videos. And yeah, Sophia and I have got some pretty exciting adventures planned for the next few months here. So stay tuned for that. Thanks.